Hello, Cori Yoder of Coriander Quilts, back at you with another fun-filled Coriander Saturday. I'm excited to be chatting with all of you here today. We've got more beautiful viewer quilts, viewer questions, and I've got a free block and block tutorial for today. So many fun things, so stick around. Well, as you can see, my table is pretty filled with all kinds of goodness today. Let me know where you are watching from. I'd love to hear, and it's always fun seeing your comments start coming in. I love chatting with you guys on Saturday mornings. First off, food from the heart too. This cookbook I chatted with you guys about last week. Good news, I have now made 2 of the recipes from the cookbook, so I feel like I have a little bit better grasp of the cookbook now that I've actually tried some of the recipes. I knew it was pretty, I knew the recipes looked good, but evidence needed to be gathered as to whether they were indeed good or not. So the 2 recipes that I made were the breakfast bowl that I talked about last week, that sausage, kale, sweet potato recipe. I tried that one out first last Friday, and I went easier on the seasonings than what the recipe called for. So I did make that change, and my family liked it. They did say they would have preferred white potatoes as opposed to sweet potatoes. They don't all just love sweet potatoes. So if I made the recipe again, I would definitely go easier on the seasonings, just like I did, and then swap out the potatoes and maybe do a creamy cheese sauce rather than the feta. We like feta, but I thought it could have used a little something creamier to sort of bring everything together. So that was that recipe. The other recipe that I tried was just last night. We did sloppy Joe bowls. Those were made using ground turkey, which I really liked. And again, I went easier on the seasoning. So I think what I'm tending to notice, I don't know if I'll think this for all the recipes going forward. I have some more that I'm going to try this week, but it seems like the seasonings are a little heavier, specifically the salt, but then even some of the other ones are a little heavier than I would go. So I do find myself backing off of the seasonings. I did the sloppy Joe bowl, and then there was a slaw that went with that I also made, and everything, both recipes that I made, I pulled those seasonings back. So just something to keep in mind. It's a beautiful cookbook. I do still like the recipes. I am just going to be cautious and really consider if I want to add as much seasoning as the recipe calls for. I think after you've been cooking for any length of time, you sort of know about what you prefer, and so it's pretty easy to adjust those measurements, but just thought I would mention that. And then I also have I'll link to this cookbook again, actually both of them. And if you want to see a little bit more detail of the cookbook, if you weren't here last week, you can do that in last week's video. And then I've got 2 more coriander fun finds I wanted to talk about. So Nicole just ran upstairs to grab something for me, and Tigsy made a quick appearance. He came shooting down the stairs as soon as she opened the door. So we thought, well, maybe he'll just pop in and say hi real quick. So that's probably all you're gonna get of him today. But she went upstairs to grab my water bottle because I am talking about this Swig Life stainless steel tumbler as one of my coriander fun finds. And I thought, well, hey, let's show them too what I usually am drinking out of. So I am a giant fan of these iron flask water bottles. This is not an ad. It's just, I love these so much. I have bought several of them. I've bought them as gifts. I've bought them for my family. I just love this brand. I like them because they are stainless steel. They're super sturdy. The straw is not a bitey straw. You know, the ones I'm talking about where you have to bite them to suck out of them. I hate that kind. So this is just a regular straw. I don't find that it leaks, and it keeps things really cold. They've got lots of different sizes. This is actually the smallest size that I have owned. I lost 2 of them on various trips that I've taken, and this is my most recent one that I have replaced those previous 2 with. Hopefully this one I don't lose quite as quickly, but I just love them. Iron Flask brand, and I just get them on Amazon. And so this is what I am used to drinking out of. I love these. But just last week, the gals at Fat Quarter Shop sent me this Swig Life stainless steel tumbler. And this is 40 ounces, so it is bigger than the water bottle I'm currently using. And it looks really nice. I haven't used it yet. A nice straw, just standard straw. and it is insulated. It will fit in my cup holder, which is going to be so nice. Sometimes this style does not fit in a cup holder, so I thought this was really pretty. And of course, all of those beautiful quilt blocks that are on the tumbler itself are just beautiful. So I wanted to share that with you. From what I understand, this is a limited edition release, only available on Fat Quarter Shop, and once it's sold out, it's gone. So I wanted to mention that for you, as well as my current favorite water bottle, but I think I'm going to really like this one too. So we'll see. I'll keep you updated. I'll keep you updated on my cookbook recipes as I try them and what we think about the tumbler as we try it, but it's beautiful. I also have the smaller version, the red version, and I really like that one. That one is perfect for when you want to take hot coffee along with you on a trip. I wouldn't take this much coffee along, but I would take this much water along, because I always love having a good water bottle. So that's those two. Move my cookbook out of the way here too. You guys are getting a little bit of everything here today. These Coriander Fun Finds are a lot of fun to share because it allows me to chat about just some of my favorite things that aren't necessarily quilting related. This next thing is quilting related, but wanted to chat about it just a little bit because it was something a little bit new for me. Not totally new, but you'll see what I'm saying. So these are the Wildflower Wovens from Susie Quilts, and they are an art gallery fabric. And I wanted to try these out because I love wovens, and this was my first experience with art gallery wovens, and I was curious how they might differ from other wovens that I have used. So I purchased these on Etsy from Chicory and Thread. I will link to that Etsy shop. Of course, these fabrics are available in local quilt shops as well as online quilt shops. And I really just wanted to see how they felt. I haven't used them, obviously, as they're still in the bundle, but I was really curious what I would think about how they feel. So in comparison to other wovens that I have felt, they do seem to be a little bit more structured, maybe a higher thread count, and similar to what you would expect if you've used art gallery fabrics before. And I thought the palette was really pretty. I'm just gonna lay these out here. And I always like the texture with wovens. That's what draws me in. I like the different dobby dots, I don't know, they just have good texture. They add just a little something to your quilt projects. And I am also going to link to where Susie talked about these wovens in a blog post because it was full of lots of information about using them, different projects, you know, just her thoughts from a designer perspective on these fabrics. So that is all of them. And I do think they're really pretty, and I do like the way they feel. One thing I didn't do is flip to the other side, because that is one fun thing about wovens is you have a little bit of difference from the front to the back, and you can certainly use both sides. I have done that with wovens to get just a little bit of a different look to a fabric. Let's see what this one looks like. So there's that one, just a little bit different from the front side, and it can be really fun to use both sides. So here you can see the back and then the front. And we'll look at this one yet too. I don't expect there to be as much difference on this one, but we'll see what it looks like. Yes, so very similar. I would be hard pressed to say which is the wrong side and which is the right side on this particular fabric. But that gives you an idea, at least in video format. You don't have the fun of feeling what they feel like, but it gives you an idea of the fabrics, at least by sight. So I have no project planned for these. Isn't that selvage pretty? No project planned for these, but I did want to see what they were like, and I think they are going to be very nice to sew with. So Wildflower Wovens is the name of this little bunch of fabrics. So that is the second Coriander Fun Find for today. Now let me slide some of these things over And we're gonna move on to viewer quilts. I have a bunch of really fun viewer quilts to share today. So let's just start talking about those. This first quilt was sent in by Carolyn S. And she says, I had just found out Cori was on YouTube and decided to try my hand at her Beautiful Day mystery block. Unfortunately, I couldn't get my hands on enough Beautiful Day fabrics, so I remembered I had purchased a panel of Cori's a while back. I pulled some apricot and ash fabrics that coordinated beautifully with my panel, but found I didn't have enough of them. I dug through my stash again and came up with some cozy day fabrics I felt I could use. So I began my first Cori quilt. Each block was surrounded by a star-type pattern, and I found I had almost double the amount of peach coral blocks than I did green and gray. So my son suggested the layout in the picture. I wanted this big enough to fit my queen size bed, and I was able to find some cozy up yardage to border and enlarge this quilt. I love watching your videos every week and really appreciate your free quilt along patterns. So the quilt that you are seeing here utilizes the panel, as you heard, and patterns that I provided during the free Beautiful Day sew-along. It was a mystery sew-along, and it was another fun one. So right now we're doing the Callie & Co. mystery. I like to do these different sew-alongs. I usually have one about once a year in some capacity. Sometimes it's not a mystery. I've done them that go along with a different pattern or with a book or something like that. But every year I like to do a little bit of something. So the Beautiful Day patterns are still available. I will have those linked if you have a panel and you might like to try your hand at making those blocks. The next quilt is from Nancy P. She says, attached are a picture of the turtle quilt from Oh Happy Day. Sorry, I can't remember the exact name. So the name of this quilt is called Slow Down. She says she made it for a great niece living in Iceland. It is made with On the Bright Side by Me and My Sister Designs and quilted with Champagne Bubbles by Missouri Star Quilt Company. This was so much fun to make, and they absolutely love it. So thank you so much for sharing that quilt with us, Nancy. That is absolutely adorable. I always love seeing pictures of that turtle quilt. I no longer have copies of Oh Happy Day in my Etsy shop. I've sold out of all of my copies, but you can still find them available online, and I can't say for certain locally, but I would imagine that you would still be able to find copies here and there locally as well. Rebecca A. says, hello, Nicole and Cori. I have been a watcher of Coriander Quilts since the early days and love your patterns and fabrics. I thought I would send you some pictures of quilts I have made using 2 of your patterns. I made them a while ago. The first is a quilt I made for a niece for her wedding 6 years ago. I used your 9th & Vine PDF quilt pattern in Bloomsbury fabric by Franny and Jane from Moda, no longer available. Blue is her favorite color, and I thought this pattern showed off the fabrics beautifully. Although a larger quilt, I found it very straightforward to put together because of your excellent instructions. All the piecing and quilting was done by me on my domestic machine. The second is the Playful Petals quilt from your book of the same name. This was a great way to use up some of the larger scraps I had. I loved the idea of using different colored threads for the stems of the petals. Also pieced and quilted on my domestic machine. Please excuse my children's hands and feet in the pictures. They were my assistants. I really enjoyed seeing these 2 quilt pictures. I love 9th & Vine and Playful Petals. Well, that was the first book that I wrote, and so anytime I see projects made from that book, it's just such a neat thing to see. 9th & Vine is only available currently as a PDF. That is one that I debate bringing back again in a paper version. So if that's something that might interest you, let me know, and maybe if enough people are interested in a paper version, once again, of that pattern, I can make that happen. Next up, this is such a neat one, guys. So this was sent in from Lacey O, and she says, hello, wanted to share the quilt my daughter Noelle, who was 14 at the time, made me last summer. She did an awesome job with her biggest quilt to date. She hand quilted it herself after she made the top. We love your fabric and patterns. Isn't that so neat? That's the biggest Woolly Stars quilt that I have seen. And I was so impressed that a 14-year-old made this beautiful quilt. Not only is there a lot of piecing in those blocks, it's straightforward piecing, but a lot of piecing. But then enlarging the quilt to make it that size, definitely added to the level of work that went into that quilt. So well done, Noelle. That is so neat. Loved seeing that one. We have another Woolly Stars quilt sent in by Allison E. She says, I recently finished a Woolly Stars quilt and photographed it on my bed, so ignore the quilt peeking out at the top and bottom. We had a collie who was very good at sheep herding, so this quilt is in memory. And then she also sent a really neat picture of the collie doing his work of sheep herding. Kirsten S. says, I had purchased Corey's book, A Very Coriander Christmas. I missed out on purchasing any of her Christmas fabric line, Hollyberry. However, I really wanted to make the bonus quilt shown in this same book. I attempted to gather Christmas material from various other lines. I decided it was never going to be right, as the reds and greens and patterns were not coordinating. I pre-ordered a fat quarter bundle and yardage from Corey's fabric line, Starberry, from my local quilt shop to complete this wish list quilt. I quilted in the ditch using 100 weight thread to get texture. I was very motivated to complete this after waiting for the right fabric. This quilt was finished by me September 2024. I love this quilt. So this was fun to see made using Starberry. My original Coriander Quilts projects were made using Hollyberry, as she said, so it was neat to see it made using Starberry. And that is the bonus quilt from the A Very Coriander Christmas book. Heidi R. says, hi, Corey and Nicole. It's so lovely to hear of sisters working together. I hope you feel the blessing of one another in your day. Well, I really do enjoy working with Nicole. She's a lot of fun to have here. She's so helpful, and she definitely makes my workload a lot easier. She is doing a little dance in the background that you guys can't see. I love working with you too. We do have a lot of fun working together. In fact, today we get to go on a little field trip. We're going to go to one of my local quilt shops, and we get to see one of the Moda reps and see all of the new fabric lines that are going to be in quilt shops next fall. So we are spending a little bit more time together today, and I think we're both looking forward to that. So back to Heidi R's quilt. She says, I would like to share a photo with you. I only seem to have snapshots before the binding was added, but hopefully these pre-finished images are still of interest to you. One of my nieces turns 21 later this spring, and ahead of the date, it's been my pleasure to sew her a quilt in her favorite color of purple. I gathered a number of different fat quarters, and in pondering what design I could use, I came across an older YouTube post of your Calliope quilt. It seemed a perfect match to my need, not least because it would absorb the different fabrics, but also because it would be easy to extend its length with additional blocks to better reflect my niece's 5-foot 10-inch height. The inner strips were pale lilac/purple, so arguably this is a monochrome version of your Calliope. Heidi had her quilt quilted by a long arm quilter. I loved seeing this version in all purple, and I know some of you big purple fans are going to love this version as well. Calliope is still available as a free pattern over on my blog, so I'll be sure and link that to you. It is a fun one because it looks trickier to piece than it actually is. It goes together so nicely, and it's not a tricky one, even though it might look like it is. So thank you for sending in that Calliope quilt, Heidi. That is lovely. The last quilt we have today is from Jean S. She says, this is from the Sew Sampler box. It's called Al Fresco. I wanted a bigger quilt, so I made 9 blocks instead of 4 and added a border. I used the Sunwash line along with some other fabrics. Now, if that isn't just a happy, sunshiny summer quilt, I don't know what is. That turned out so lovely. So thank you all for sending your projects in. Those are always so much fun to see and then to share with everybody. If you are a viewer and you would love to have a photo featured in an upcoming video, I have Nicole's email address in the description box below. You can just send her photos. And it's really nice when you send along those descriptions, as you can hear the other viewers did. That just makes it really nice to be able to share additional information for anyone who might be wishing to make a quilt similar to what you have made. So thank you so much for sending those in. Up next, we are moving on to some viewer questions. We have Beautiful Day fabrics, not Beautiful Day, we have Abloom fabrics coming out next month in April. And so I pulled some different questions that I had received that reference Abloom or questions about the different fabrics within the Abloom fabric line. And we're going to be talking about those just a bit. So the first question is from Vadia Carroll, and she says, where do I get the fabric for Barnstar 9? Well, this is the Barnstar 9 quilt. All of the fabrics are Abloom, and they will be in quilt shops both locally and online next month. And you'll be able to purchase them at that time. Now, I do have a trunk show video where I talked more about all of my Abloom quilts. I'll link to that. But here's just a quick peek at Barnstar 9. So this is a 40-inch square quilt, just a really nice table topper, wall hanging size. Next up, a question from Lori Bloom. She says, I have wanted to make Woodland Frolic, but obviously cannot find enough apricot and ash. Do you think Abloom will work with these colors? Yes, I do. So what I have done, I've pulled Woodland Frolic. We'll look at that, and then I'm going to kind of talk over the fabrics that I would use from Abloom if I were making a Woodland Frolic using Abloom. So Woodland Frolic is this really cute throw-sized animal quilt. I'm going to lay this on the cutting table and show you these different animal blocks. I need to make a little more space because they're just adorable. You could easily take this pattern and make just one of the blocks, and it would be just a cute sort of crib-sized quilt. If you made just one of the animal blocks and then bordered it out, it would be a really nice size. So there's the fox. Here we have the squirrel. And then we have an owl. Isn't he cute? There's the owl. And then we have a little hedgehog over here on the corner. So just these little woodland animals and nice big blocks. You can see big blocks. All right, so that is just a teeny little peek of the actual quilt. Now let's look at the pattern so you can see the whole thing right here, and then we're going to talk about some of these fabrics. For those of you wondering, this pattern as it is like this is a 61 by 61 inch square pattern quilt, and the blocks, let me double check what they finish at. So an individual block will measure 24 inches finished. So big roomy blocks. Let's start with the squirrel. So he is made using the darker gray colors. These are all of the Abloom fabrics. So these are the ones that are going to be in quilt shops next month. If we go to the dark grays, we can see them all here. And then I'm also going to put the light gray right beside it here as well. Okay. So when you are swapping out fabrics, you kind of want to pay attention to the scale as well as the color of the fabrics. Here, the squirrel tail has the largest scale fabric, so I think this would be a great choice for the squirrel tail. The main body of the squirrel is a dark gray print with just a little bit of motif on it. So it's mostly reading gray. I think this print here or this print would be good options for this, the head and then this body portion of the squirrel. His arm is still a dark gray print, but it's got a lot more print to it. So this little birdie print is going to be similar in effect to what you see here for his arm. And then for his chest and his nose, in the apricot and ash fabrics, that was a gingham print, a gray and white gingham print. So I would probably just swing over here into this light gray section and choose one of these to give it a similar look. And I think I would probably end up going with maybe this print right here, which is this same print, just on the lighter gray, using this. This is also the same print that is used for the hedgehog face and then his feet. So if you're following the pattern and swapping out that fabric, exactly like what is shown here, you would also be using this print then for his face and for his feet. When we move over to the fox, you can see that is made using some of those darker coral shades. Let me grab those fabrics. So here are those shades in Abloom from the lightest to the darkest. For the fox's face and body, that is a print that reads mostly as a solid. So I would probably choose this print right here if I were choosing one from Abloom. And then for his tail, that is a floral print with a lot more movement, a lot more motif prints going on right there. So I don't see one in the darker shades. You could use this one if you wanted to. It's going to blend in a little bit more than what it does here if you put, if you're using this for his face and his body, and then if you use this for his tail portion, it's not going to have as much contrast as what it does here. So I would probably just switch to this lighter print. I would probably use this for his tail right here and then a little bit over here and put that with this print right here. So these are the two that I would use for body and then for that tail. He has a little bit of another print right above his feet and the tip of his tail, and I would go up here to these even lighter shades and use, you could go with this would be the same, it wouldn't have as much contrast, but if you go just a little bit lighter, maybe this print here or even this little print here, I think that would be a nice choice. So I would probably do this one right here. Just that little rosebud print for the tip of his tail and then over top of his feet. Moving over to the owl. Now for this one, I would make a little bit of a change. So here you see that with the apricot and ash fabric, it would have been more similar to this print right here. This print isn't as filled in the empty white spaces as the apricot and ash fabric. So it's not going to have quite the same contrast with the background as the original fabric did. For that reason, I would swap that print out and I would use this print right here at the top for the main body of the owl. That's going to have a nicer amount of contrast against the background. And then for his arms here, you could use this print, this little plaid print in the white background, but I think it might even be nicer to use it on the aqua background. Let me see if I can, there's my aquas. So this right here. So use this for those arm portions and then this for the main body of the owl. And then you're going to have just really nice contrast against that white background. For the hedgehog, we talked about his face and feet being one of these stone shades. Maybe this one right here. For the main body, we're back to those darker grays again. And I think this little polka dot print right here could be a really cute choice. So you'd have that little polka dotty print against this print right here. And then these little spiny bits are the same fabric as the fabric that we chose for the fox here. And then the outer dark ones would be the same as we chose right here. And that's how I would make those changes. This little border fabric would be really pretty in maybe this right here, this floral. And that about sums up our little woodland frolic. So that's kind of the swaps that I would make, how I would approach switching those out, paying attention to not only the colors, but then the density of the prints to get a very similar look using Abloom as to what we see here in apricot and ash. All right, next question comes from Lisa Cox. And she says, I really like the stone color on the Abloom fabric line. Do you think any of the prints in that color would work as a background? And if so, do you have any patterns mocked up that way? So she's asking about that really light gray. And I do think a lot of these prints could work really beautifully as a background. I don't think I have any of them currently mocked up. The ones that I really like the sketchy fabrics for backgrounds, either one of those two. Those do add more movement than you're going to want in every quilt. There's a lot of contrast in those two prints, but it still makes a beautiful background. If you want something a little bit less eye-catching, something that doesn't have quite as much contrast to the print, the little X and dot print or this little rosebud print are both going to be very beautiful as backgrounds. Aviva Hadass says, what size can you cut those cross-stitch blocks to? 12.5 inches? I can see them alternating with a sampler of pieced blocks. So she is talking about these motifs that I have on my panel in Abloom. They are right here. We see them back here as well in this quilt, and they do work beautifully pieced into a quilt. So this is what the panel looks like. It's regular running yardage, 42-inch width standard yardage, and we can cut these a few different sizes. I found that I really liked cutting them at 7 inches, and I wanted to show you this. I am going to be talking about these rulers and fussy cutting these panels in an upcoming video. These are an OmniGrid ruler. I forget the exact name of them offhand, but I'll link to them below. I purchased mine off of Amazon, if I remember correctly, and I really enjoyed using them for fussy cutting my panel squares. This was a new ruler that I was trying out. I wanted to try them because it allows you to cut different sizes without a bunch of different rulers. And I found that the way the markings are on these rulers was really nice for cutting this panel. I think you can see here how there are different frosted pieces, and those frosted pieces perfectly align with the X's on this panel. So I could really straighten everything up nicely when I was cutting them out. And so I really did like using these for cutting this panel. I cut all of them at 7 inches. If we just kind of go to this one right here. Now you're not going to be able to see this as nicely with the white on the white, but I'm going to explain what I am seeing in the hopes that it makes sense. So, and again, I am going to be going over this ruler in more detail and actually showing how to use it in an upcoming video. It has this nice plus symbol in the center of the ruler, so you can use that to center your ruler with the motif. And then the frosted sections, as I said, so there's a frosted section running right here, and I can just exactly line that up with those X's and make sure it's all nice and tidy. There's another frosted section that runs right here. These frosted sections are 1/4 inch wide, and that just happens to be how wide my X's are. The X's are slightly smaller than 1/4 inch, but they fit just right inside that little frosted section. So 7 inches is these dots right here. So it's 1/4 inch in from the exterior edge here. So you can see, that gives us a nice amount of space in between our motifs. We could go bigger if we wanted to, but I really liked this size. This ruler goes all the way up. It's the same brand, just different sizes. Goes all the way up to 8.5. So you can see how wide that goes around here. And then just for reference, I had my 12.5 inch ruler hanging around somewhere. Where did I put him? He has gotten lost. 12.5 inch ruler. Where are you? Well, we'll grab this one. This one's bigger. This one goes all the way up to, what is this, 14.5? But we can still use it. I can still use this to show you. Now I wonder where I put that other ruler. Anyhow, so if I center this one here, it's roughly about like that. 12.5 would be here and here. So you can see it cuts into the blocks, not only on the left and right, but also up on the top and bottom. But then you can also see, how much space you have in between the different blocks. You want to make sure that whatever size you end up cutting at, you have enough space that you can cut all of them at that measurement. I thought 7 worked great. Okay, so that is a little bit of an overview of this panel. And again, I am going to see, I'm like peering around, wondering what I did with my 12.5-inch ruler. I know it's here somewhere, probably underneath those quilts that are on the chair, just off camera. But anyway, that gives you an idea of those panels, how you can cut them. Again, I'm going to talk about that a lot more because I have some fun things planned using the panel. And so I want to be able to talk about how we can cut those apart easily. Okay. Is that my last question? Oh, no, I have one more question. That's my last question about Abloom. And then this next question is a lot of fun. It comes to us from Carolyn French. She says, I love making star blocks and have learned so much, but I find that I sometimes cut off a point when sewing the blocks together. I think many of us have had those star points cut off at least one time or another. She says, my question, is there a way to make all star blocks a floating star? Please demo how if you can do that. Congratulations on the move. Yes, Carolyn, there is. We can absolutely do that. So this is a pattern that I had on my blog many years ago, and I revamped it and wrote it up in a little bit of a more user-friendly way. And I'm going to be having this printable over on my blog, and we're going to be doing a tutorial of it right now. They are easy to make. You construct them the same way that you do any other sawtooth star. You're just changing your proportions and measurements just a little bit. So let's just go ahead and chat about this. What you need, you're going to need 8 3-inch pink squares. I've got those cut here from various Abloom fabric scraps that I had. You could do these all in the same fabric. I just happen to have a few different fabrics, so I cut 4 different prints. So those are my A squares. You need a center square B, that is 5.5 inches square. You need some rectangles, 4 of these. We're going to be using these for our, not quite flying geese, but nearly. These are 4 by 5.5. You need 4. Those are C squares. And then we also have our D squares, 4 D squares that measure 4 inches by 4 inches. So I have everything cut and labeled here, and we're going to go ahead and just start. For your A squares, starting in step 1, as I said, these are constructed just like flying geese units. So I have drawn my diagonal line on the back of all of these. These are going to get paired with your C rectangles. So you're going to notice that the proportions are different than you might be used to when you are making flying geese. And that is going to give us tips of our stars that do not go all the way to the exterior edge. You're going to place this square, just like you see here, with a diagonal running from the top left to the bottom right. You're going to sew on that marked diagonal. Then you will press this away from the center, and you can already see what's going to happen. We're going to have a star point that doesn't go all the way up to the edge of our rectangle. Once you have pressed and made sure that everything lines up beautifully around your exterior edges, then you are going to trim out those bottom 2 layers. Next, you're going to add another A square to the other corner, following those same instructions, sewing on the marked diagonal, making sure your exterior lines up when pressed, and then trimming out those bottom 2 layers. And that is going to leave you with an almost flying geese unit. I will sew one of these together. Well, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and sew all of them together, and I'm going to show you what those will look like once you have those completed. The flying geese units are now completed. This is what they look like on the back, pressed toward the prints, just like the pattern shows. The final 2 steps we need to take are to sew together all of the blocks into rows and then to sew the rows together. You'll see the pressing instructions denoted by the arrows. After the block is completed, it is going to measure 12.5 inches square. So just looking at these blocks right here, you can see that the tips of our flying geese do not go all the way outside to that exterior edge, which does eliminate the fear and frustration of chopping off your star points. Let me sew these together and I'll show you what the completed block looks like. Here is our completed, not quite a sawtooth star block. You can see that our star points do not run all the way to the perimeter of the block, which means when we go to sew anything to the sides, top and bottom, we aren't going to have to worry about where those points are and be concerned that we might be sewing over a point or two. It creates just this wonderful perimeter of background fabric around the entire star block. This is what it would look like in a layout. All I've done is used the star block and then added sashing and borders. It's a super simple quilt to make and no fuss or worry about losing your star points. So this pattern is available over on my blog. Just for the block pattern's available as a free download. So if you want to try one out yourself, you can do so. I just used scraps that I had in my scrap bin. It's a fun way to use up those scraps. You can make your points as scrappy or as non-scrappy as you want. The center is a nice big square that is great for fussy cutting. I could have fussy cut my little flower motif in the center of the block. It'd be a really pretty block to do so. If you have any questions about this block or about anything we've chatted about in our video, feel free to leave those in the comments below. For questions to be answered in future videos, just put question in all caps. That makes it easy for us to find those questions. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will catch you again next time.